Hi everyone. So in this video, we'll discuss about important interview questions, real-time important interview questions related to manual testing, automation testing, API, database testing, Selenium, Java test engine related. So let's start with the very first question. How do you handle a bug that the developer rejects? If a developer rejects a bug, I first recheck the issue carefully to make sure it is reproducible. I verify the environment, test data, steps, screenshots, logs, API responses, or database evidence. Then I discuss the issue with the developer in a collaborative way and explain exact steps to reproduce expected versus actual behavior, business impact, supporting evidences. Sometimes the developer may not be able to reproduce the issue because of different environment or data setup. In that case, I help them reproduce the issue. If there is still disagreement, I involve the business analyst, product owner, or QA lead to confirm the requirement. The goal is not to prove someone wrong, but to ensure the issue is understood and resolved correctly. Second, what will you do if bug is not fixed for a long time? I regularly follow up on the bug and check its status with the developer or team. I also review the priority and severity, highlight the business impact, mention if it is blocking testing or release, discuss it during stand-ups or defect review meeting. If the issue is still not addressed, I escalate it to the QA lead manager or product owner. I make sure the defect remains visible and tracked until it is fixed or officially referred. How do you handle incomplete stories? If a story is incomplete or requirements are missing, I review the available acceptance criteria, discuss with the BA, product owner, or developer, raise the clarification questions early, document assumptions and blockers. I test whatever functionality is available and mention what could not be tested due to missing information. If major parts are incomplete, I recommend moving the story to the next sprint instead of testing based on the assumptions. How do you test in a short sprint cycle? In short sprint cycles, I use a risk based approach, a focus on critical and high impact feature first, start testing as soon as the build is available, test in parallel with development whenever possible, run smoke test first, then key regression test, use automation for repetitive scenarios. Good communication with the team and early involvement in the requirement discussion help reduce delays and improve the quality. How do you decide a testing is complete? Testing is complete when all the planned test cases are executed, critical and high severity defects are fixed, regression testing is completed successfully, requirements and acceptance criteria are covered, exit criteria are met, stakeholders approve the release. I also ensure that there are no open blockers that can affect the production. So the next question is, what challenges have you faced in your project? So some common challenges I have faced are unclear or changing requirements, tight timelines, unstable environments or builds, delays from dependent teams, data issues in lower environment. I handle these challenges by communicating early and clearly, prioritizing testing based on risk, tracking blockers regularly, working closely with developers, BA and other teams. This helped avoid delays and ensured smooth delivery. How do you handle tight deadlines? User under tight deadlines, I prioritize critical and high risk test cases, focus on core business flows, perform smoke and sanity testing first, reduce low priority or duplicate test scenarios, communicate risk clearly to stakeholders. If time is very limited, I suggest running automation for regression scenarios and doing manual testing only for newly changed areas. So that will be helpful. Next question is, what will you do if requirements are unclear? If requirements are unclear, I do not make assumptions immediately. Instead, I discuss with the BA or product owner, ask specific questions, review user stories, acceptance criteria, and designs, document assumptions if clarification is delayed. This help avoid incorrect testing and reduce rework later. How do you prioritize test cases? I prioritize test cases based on business impact, risk, frequency of use, areas recently changed, past defect history. For example, payment, login, checkout, and other order placement flows are tested first because they are critical for business. What if the build is unstable? When the build is unstable, I first perform smoke testing to check whether the main functionality works. If major issues are found, I stop further testing, log defects immediately, inform the team and stakeholders, wait for a stable build before continuing. This avoids wasting time on detailed testing when the build itself is not stable. What if a production bug is found? If a production issue is found, I log the defect with a high severity and priority, inform stakeholders immediately, collect logs, screenshots, and then exact steps, support root cause analysis with the development team, verify the fix in lower environments, perform regression testing to ensure no related functionality is broken. I also make sure lessons are learned so similar issues can be prevented in the future. API testing interview questions. How do you perform API testing? I test APIs by validating request method get, post, put, delete, request headers and payloads, response status code, response body, response time, error messages. I usually use tools like Postman Swagger or you can say rest assured. For example, 200 for successful request, 400 for bad request, 401 for unauthorized access, 500 for server error. I also validate whether the API response matches the business requirement. What is the difference between get and post? So get is used to retrieve data from the server, post is used to send or create data. Example, get uses /123 fetches user details, post slash orders create a new order. Get usually does not change data while post change the data in the system. What will you do in an API response? I validate status code, response body, required fields, data types, headers, response time, error handling. For example, if an API should return order details, I verify that fields like order ID, status, customer name, and amount are present and correct. How do you test negative scenarios in API testing? I test APIs with invalid data such as missing mandatory fields, wrong data types, invalid authentication token, invalid IDs, empty request body. Then I verify that the API returns the correct error code and message. If the order ID is invalid, the API should return 404 or an appropriate error message. What is authentication in API testing? Authentication verifies whether the user is allowed to access the API. Common authentication methods are basic authentication, bearer token, OAuth, API key. I verify both positive and negative scenarios such as valid token and expired token. Have you used Postman collections? Yes, I use Postman collection to group related API requests together. I can also add a test script, use environment variables, run multiple APIs together, share collections with the team. This helps save time and improve the consistency. Database testing interview questions. How do you perform database testing? Database testing involves validating whether data is stored correctly in the database after action, application actions. I usually execute SQL queries, compare UI API data with the database values, verify inserts, updates, and deletes, check data integrity. For example, after placing an order, I verify in the database that the order record is created with the correct status and amount. What SQL queries do you commonly use? So the common SQL queries I use are select, insert, update, delete, group by, join, order by. Example, select order IDs, comma status from orders where customer ID is equal to 101. So this is the example of fetching the order ID and status for the ID 101. Okay, so what is the difference between inner join and left join? So inner join returns only matching records from both the tables. Left join returns all the records from the left table and matching records from the right table. Example, if an order exists but payment details do not exist, inner join will not show the order. Left join will still show the order. Next question, how do you validate data between UI and database? I perform an action in the application and then query the database to verify the same data. Example, place an order from UI, get the order number, run SQL query, compare order status, amount, customer details. This ensures the application and database are synchronized. What will you do if data is not saved in the database? I will reproduce the issue, check application logs and API responses, run database queries, identify whether the issue is from a UI, API, or database, raise a defect with all supporting details. Automation testing, Selenium, Java testing related real-time questions. So the first one related to this is why do you use Selenium? Selenium is used for automating web application testing. It helps save time, reduce manual efforts, increase test coverage, run regression test quickly. I have used Selenium with Java and TestNG for automation purpose. Why do you use TestNG? TestNG provides test execution control, grouping, prioritization, parallel execution, reporting, Annotations like at the rate test before method, at the rate after method, it makes automation more organized and easier to maintain. What are the important test ng annotations? So common test ng annotations are at the rate before suit, at the rate before class, at the rate before method, at the rate test, at the rate after method, at the rate after class, at the rate after suit. So example, at the rate before method launches browser before each test, at the rate after method closes browser after each test. Next question is what is page object model POM? So page object model is a design pattern where page elements and methods are stored in a separate classes. Benefits: better code reusability, easier maintenance, cleaner framework. So you can understand it better and it's easy to read. So for example, login page class contains username, password, login button and login methods, and we in the test class we will simply call that a login page method, all the login page class methods, and we can just verify there in the test class. So you will understand that in the like page object model concept. I have already explained differently in one separate video about POM. So what is difference between implicit wait and explicit wait? Implicit wait it applies globally, waits for a specific time for all the elements. Explicit wait applied for a specific element or condition, more flexible and recommended. So example, WebDriver wait is equal to new WebDriver wait. In parameter we have to pass parameter as a driver comma duration dot off seconds, 10 seconds, wait dot until expected condition dot visibility of element. So this element we have to wait till this element is visible. So how do you handle dynamic elements in Selenium? I use relative XPath, CSS selectors, start with or contains in XPath, explicit wait. So these are the different methods that I use to handle the dynamic web elements in Selenium. So for example, double slash button contains text submit. So this is the one of the XPath using contains method. This helps when element ID change dynamically, right? So when the element is changing continuously, the element is dynamic. At that time, we can use the contains XPath method. So this is the contains XPath method. Okay, so the next question is how do you handle dropdowns in Selenium? For normal dropdowns, I use the select class. For example, select dropdown is equal to new select driver dot find element by dot id country, dropdown dot select by visible text India. So using this select class, when can we use that? Whenever the id is the tag name is select, right, for that element. If the tag name is not select, we can simply go for custom dropdowns. We can use click and select using XPath or CSS method. And there is one more method using actions class also we can handle the dropdown. The next question, 30 number, how do you handle multiple windows in Selenium? So I use window handles. Example, string parent is equal to driver dot get window handle. Then in using for each loop, I will use string window colon driver dot get window handles, and then using method driver dot switch to dot window, and we will pass parameter as window. So this will change the window from parent window to child window. And when we have to come back from child window to parent, we can pass this parameter parent here, or we can write outside this for each loop a driver dot switch to dot window parent. So it will bring back on the main parent window. So the window id will be in the string format, so that's why we have used data type as string. So the next question is how do you run tests in parallel using testng? I enable parallel execution in testng.xml. Example, suit name is equal to suit, parallel is equal to test, thread count is equal to 3. So this helps reduce execution time. The next question is how do you capture screenshot in Selenium when a test fails? So I use text screenshot interface inside a listener or a catch block. Example, file src is equal to text screenshot driver dot get screenshot as output type dot file. Screenshots help in debugging failed tests. How do you handle stale element exception? A stale element reference exception occurs when the element is refreshed or recreated. To handle it, I relocate the element, use explicit waits, avoid storing elements for a long time. What framework have you used in Selenium? I have worked with a framework using Selenium plus Java plus TestNG, Page Object Model, Maven, Extend Reports, Log4j, Jenkins, or Azure DevOps for execution. The framework supports reusable methods, reporting, screenshots, and parallel execution. How do you decide which test cases should be automated? I automate repetitive test cases, regression scenarios, stable functionality, high volume data scenarios, critical business flow. I avoid automating frequently changing or one-time test cases. Then next question, what are the advantages of automation testing? So advantages, faster execution, better accuracy, reusability, useful for regression testing, can run overnight or in a CI/CD pipelines. However, automation does not completely replace manual testing. What is the difference between smoke testing and regression testing? Smoke testing checks whether the build is stable, covers basic functionality. Regression testing ensures new changes have not broken existing functionality, covers broader scenarios. How do you handle test data in automation? I store test data in Excel, properties files, JSON files, database. So this makes tests reusable and easier to maintain. How do you integrate Selenium test with CI/CD? So I integrate automation scripts with Jenkins or Azure DevOps pipeline. Whenever new code is deployed, tests run automatically, results are generated, field tests and screenshots are shared. This helps detect issues early. The next question and the last one is, why should we hire you? You should hire me because I have experience in manual testing, API testing, database testing, automation using Selenium, Java, and TestNG. I am a quick learner, good team player, and I handle challenges calmly. I focus on quality, communication, and timely delivery. So these are the important interview questions related to Selenium, Java, then related to API testing, database testing, manual testing. So these are the real-time questions, and that will help you crack interviews. Yeah, that is it. Thank you.